Hey, what's up guys, Ref here. So today we're going to be seeing yet another example of the Rev-approved infinite content glitch, where step 1 involves a VTuber doing or saying something stupid. Step 2, you make it into content. Step 3, that VTuber eventually becomes a hypocrite by their own previous standards they use to judge others. And then finally, step 4, you make even more content out of it, and that's exactly what we're doing in today's video. So what is the context? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it involves this VTuber named L, and you can read their bio. They obviously make a lot of adult-focused content. That's where they get the primary source of their traction from. Now, they shared this on their alt account, and they were trying to make a statement about men and their jealousy towards powerful and successful women. And it did not go the way they had intended. This is the post. It says, "A woman's success should not make you feel uncomfortable. The many times I've met a man who became uncomfortable with me doing well for myself is a lot more than you'd think." Now, this would get a lot of negative responses, but I think the context behind this has to do with the recent move by Twitch to appoint 50 new ambassadors, and there's only been around 200 since the program launched in 2018, so it's a pretty big deal to add on 50 new ambassadors. And one of those ambassadors was this Shibuya individual who's Japanese, and she is now one of the ambassadors. In this tweet, you would see like 10 million views and a lot of conversation because apparently she used to do a lot of adult content in the past, and now she's on the ambassador team, and people are saying, of course, Dan Clancy would hire someone like that, but apparently that's what she did in the past. How much that is relevant to the current time, that's really up to your interpretation, but I'd be much more concerned about the ambassadors having a role in promoting things that are woke. I mean, we've seen some insane agenda pushing by ambassadors and related positions before. I mean, just go back to 2020. Not even really over 5 years ago at this point, Twitch hired a self-identifying deer person as a member of their safety council.
So in my spare time, I go out to my yard. In my spare time, I go out to my yard and I prance around and I eat grass. And I just munch it because it helps me feel like in tune with my deer self.
I can't emphasize enough that this took place just barely over 5 years ago. This should have been a sign that things were going really badly and we're heading in a terrible direction back in 2020. I mean, this person, a self-identifying deer person, had an infamous clip where they had a, I quote, "deergasm" live on Twitch when someone was petting their antlers. That should have been a sign things were heading in a terrible direction back in 2020, but it really represented a trend because this same person who was on this safety council for Twitch had multiple tweets speaking negatively about men and gamers, and that sounds a lot like what happened on these platforms and in the gaming industry, where people representing those platforms seem to openly despise the target audience of those platforms. And this is just a very exaggerated version of that, but this was a trend that took place for many years. And also 2020 is relevant to the VTuber we're talking about today, given their past comments that took place while they were canceling someone else back in that year. But let's go back to the VTuber in question, L, here in their tweets, talking about women's success and how it shouldn't make men feel uncomfortable and how it's made people very uncomfortable, men in particular, in some sort of a scenario where they were, I guess, interested in her. And people are quick to point out that she's saying this, as a woman, but identifies as non-binary in all of their accounts. And also, people started to ask, well, did these men feel a certain type of a way when they asked what that success was in? Because it's no secret that their success is in making adult content, okay? And that's not being like mean, it's being a bit realistic. A lot of people, men in particular, if they were looking at someone who said, I am successful in my career, if you said this is where the success is, they might have a particular reaction to it. And really at that point, it comes down to preferences. And I don't think there's really anything too crazy about that. People will see, oh, this is where you're getting your success from. And they might feel a certain way about that in the scenario that she is describing in the tweet. And that is reflected in the replies to it, where people say stuff like this. No offense, L, but if you ever disclose to these men how you make that money, like it or not, the reality is that the majority of men these days don't have a problem with women who make equal or more than them. It's how many women make that money that they see issue with. Another one says, maybe it's your personality. Why don't you ask the people you harassed about it, right, Miss K? And that name will be very relevant in just a moment, but here's some more saying, maybe, I mean this with no offense, but could it have something to do with the fact that you make adult content? This person says, did you tell them how you were doing well for yourself? Like, that's probably more of the reason than being successful. Like, how are you successful probably matters to them less than being successful in itself. And that is something that is kind of repeated over and over again in the replies. But she really tried to gas this up, okay? She made this tweet on her alt account, which, you know, has tens of thousands of followers. It's not like it's a totally random account, but her next action would be reposting it on that alt account, and then she would switch over to her main account with like triple the following and repost it there as well. Like, she was really trying to gas this thing up, and it's like the more attention she brought to this post, the more criticism and negativity she would receive. But, you know, this sort of messaging I think is performative and it's hypocritical for reasons that go beyond what I just described, but it works on some people, right? You can see all of these replies if you dig down enough. There are people supporting this, calling her a girl boss and saying that all these men in this scenario are simply insecure and just can't deal with women who are successful. They're eating this up. But one of the quotes point out something very important. Funny you say a woman's success shouldn't make you uncomfortable, yet you joined in on the harassment Kirsha receives and another VTuber named Kyoto before you rebranded and you never apologized. Maybe it's not men, it's you. You're the problem. Now that is some ancient lore, ladies and gentlemen. So Elle used to have former accounts under different names, and right now she is on the rebranded accounts. And unfortunately, the skeletons haven't really left the closet, right? They're still there, and they get brought up every time she wants to start talking about things like jealousy, because her attacks on other VTubers in the past seemed like they were born out of jealousy. And that Kyoto situation goes back to 2020. If you want to talk about like kind of the OG days of the Western VTubing scene becoming what it is today, at least on social media, a nonstop cancellation fest that's obsessed with virtue signaling and policing people's behaviors, Kyoto was like one of the first ones to have it happen to them. This VTuber, because of her very problematic design, she was attacked relentlessly by primarily other VTubers, right? Her following, though, would blow up as a result. How many times have we seen this before, right? She had a few, I think, 100 followers, ended up with like 10K in like 2 days because all these VTubers trying to cancel her just brought more attention, and the VTuber fans, unlike them, actually supported her and rallied behind her. And one of the people to harass Kyoto back then was, of course, L. And seemingly upset with the traction that this Kyoto person was getting, they made a post back in 2020 saying, important message, please retweet. It is not okay to normalize a character that looks like a child and is sexualized. Look closer at what you're supporting. Please don't give us VTubers a bad face. This is just the beginning for us. And please retweet this if you want to support the community. I'll be unfollowing anyone tomorrow who's still supporting these actions. This was about Kyoto, right? She was follow policing people. She was saying that we're going to set the standard for the community. She got roasted for this back then, right? She was trying to be the one under this different name back then, trying to basically speak on behalf of the VTubing community, which, of course, there's really no such thing as a VTubing community. It's more of a scene and a medium, but I digress. As pointed out by Curry Renji here, she was very active, and many were very active back then. A lot of them have deleted their posts, or at this point, because it's been like 5+ years, their accounts have completely disappeared, or they've retired, or what have you. But you can see K, which is now L, going through various people thanking her for the response, right? The call out post saying, no, thank you for retweeting this. And this person says, already spoke about an hour or so ago, had to block a mutual already as well because they claimed we were being mean. And L, formerly K, says, F them, they can suck my ink sac. And then, as you can see, eventually these tweets would be deleted from K/L. And you can see the initial conversation here. So they're clearly trying to hide some of these conversations, but this is where it gets very hypocritical because you remember the actual call out post, right? Well, she was getting very excited that it was working, that this harassment brigade on Kyoto was working, saying, update, I got her on private. Let's effing go, guys. Let's keep going, though. So celebrating that this Kyoto person was getting harassed to the point of privating their account, and then she was celebrating this and saying, let's keep going. So it wasn't enough to slander this VTuber and to incite this harassment brigade against them. Even when the VTuber being targeted went private, they wanted more. And of course, this whole thing was predicated on this whole idea that they were doing something wrong, that Kyoto was doing something inappropriate and problematic with their design. And of course, when K here would eventually rebrand to their current account, one of their first streams ever was described as Hentai Nights, where they played the not safe for work version of Nekopara, which of course includes all kinds of lolicon, which she just found abhorrently problematic just 2 years prior and thought that was something you should be run off of social media for, even if your design of your model is simply a lolly and nothing more than that. And of course, as you can see, that post was also deleted. So every time she gets into a bind with this stuff, she just starts deleting her posts. There was also back in 2022 a series of Google Docs that had people who expressed very bad experiences with L, as well as some of L's managers, and that she was a very controlling and toxic and jealous person. It's worth a read if you want to take a look at all this stuff, but you kind of get the point already. Now, going back to the post in question, well, the sort of jealousy and the unapologetic nature of her involvement in that previous harassment campaign came into question back in 2024, where Kirsha, many of you know her, she was removed as a guest who had her own panel at a convention called Offkai. And one of the guests, of course, was L. And people thought this was very ironic that they thought Kirsha was so problematic and awful she had to be removed. But someone like L with an unapologetic history of harassing people, other VTubers in particular, had this panel ready to go. In fact, Offkai would hide replies, bringing up her former harassment campaign, which looked very bad. And in case you're familiar with this whole thing, I talked about it in a pretty long video back in 2024. Crazy situation involving Kirsha. She really got completely screwed over by this convention. Here's just like a small taste, a small rundown. Offkai would try to provide an explanation as to why she was removed from the panel, or her panel was removed. And they basically said this is a volunteer-run event, and your name coming up made some of our staff uncomfortable. So the staff being uncomfortable, I guess, is a reason to remove someone from a convention. But don't worry, they said you're not blacklisted from the event. You can still come as a paid guest. Yeah, she didn't go, obviously. But eventually, in a conversation on Discord, someone involved with Offkai would provide the evidence of why they removed her. And this is, again, another sign of how things just come full circle with this cancel culture stuff back in 2024, listing off the reasons. And it says a lot of it comes down to gender identity and DEI type issues in these tweets right here that Kirsha would supply. And you can look at them. They are hilarious. Here's just one example of the problematic tweets. You can see when Discord seemed to roll out a pronoun feature. She made her pronouns Burger Queen. That was something that was evidence to justify her removal from Offkai as someone with a panel at that convention. Absolutely crazy times, ladies and gentlemen, but that's kind of the history here, right? It goes back to the rev cycle here, the infinite content glitch. You have L saying stupid stuff and starting harassment campaigns against other VTubers seemingly out of jealousy for their growth or the attention that they were receiving. And then we made it into content back then and in other scenarios. And then eventually, this VTuber L, for example, comes out with a virtue signaling post that makes them pretty hypocritical by their own standards. And what do? We make more content out of it. That is the infinite content glitch, ladies and gentlemen. But that's going to do it for today's video. As always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comment section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.